So tonight I'm going to be doing a little presentation about foxes, just so you know, it's the sentience of pest foxes. And I say pests very lightly. I don't see any animals as pests, but sadly, as humans, there is not a single species on the planet that one person would deem and call a pest, which is a shame. And I really think that's just down to misunderstanding the species. So tonight, hopefully I can educate you a little bit about foxes and make you enjoy them as much as I enjoy foxes. So without further ado, I will start tonight's presentation. So yeah, here we go then. So hope we've got a nice warm drink ready and sitting comfy to listen to me babble on about foxes. Something I will do for those who know me really well. If you get me talking about wildlife, I just never stop. But hey, this is the fun of educating people and talking about animals. So who am I? I am Kevin Newell. I'm the owner and founder of the wildlife business Humane Wildlife Solutions, who we formed in 2012 to offer people and businesses a non-lethal, ethical, vegan, environmentally friendly and ethical alternative to pest control, something truly humane, truly non-lethal, truly ethical. And the reason I founded the business was, fun enough, because of foxes. And just before I started the business, I'd come across a program called Fox Wars, and seeing just how many of our country's urban and rural foxes are killed each year. It's in hundreds, if not thousands of foxes are killed. And it's crazy that this many foxes are killed when it don't actually need to be. So when I first started out, I was mentored by an amazing gentleman called John Bryant, who sadly passed away, I think it was the end of last year. And this guy, him and others from a company also called Foxagon, really taught me a lot about what I'm doing now. And I have a big love and thanks to both Foxagon and to the late John Bryant for teaching me everything I know and enabling me to go out there and help our urban foxes, because by God, they need it. So I work with foxes throughout the UK, helping people overcome conflicts and learning to appreciate these incredible mammals. Now, they're probably one of the biggest urban mammals you're going to come across, unless you're lucky enough to have badgers or deer bumbling through your garden in the evening or mornings. And I think people find the larger the mammal or the wildlife species is, the more they get scared and the more misunderstood I think they come across as. So I want to try and change that narrative, because I don't want people to be scared of these animals. You know, all the years I've been working with them in close quarters, and I'll tell some stories of them later on, I've never come across a fox which is even seemed like it was going to cause them any harm. You know, and I've had to catch these animals. I've cared for these animals in wildlife rehabilitation, and I've never been in a situation where I've actually been scared of having to work with a fox. The only time recently I've been scared working with animals, I was trying to exclude a squirrel from someone's loft and balancing precariously on the wooden beams in someone's loft, not wanting to fall through their ceiling onto them below. This squirrel was charging me in the loft space, going back and forth, and I couldn't do it. I just had to stand there and put up with it. But yeah, you know, something small as a squirrel can be quite scary. But once you know what they're doing, they're not really that bad. And foxes are the same. They're a big creature, but they're definitely not an animal to be afraid of. And there's a few myths about them that hopefully we can dispel tonight. So I'm lucky to have spent a lot of time with foxes in the wild and also in wildlife rescue centres. So I've been running a business since 2012, but I've also been working at wildlife rescues up in the Newark in Aberdeenshire, and even a spell at Hazelhead Wildlife Rescue down here in the central belt of Scotland, where I got hands-on with foxes as always. And just having the privilege to help raise cubs and help care for injured foxes, you really get to understand and know these creatures. And much like I said when I did the Goal Talk last Monday, every fox is so individual. They're characters and their traits and their behavior is so individual to each single fox. So, you know, if anyone ever says to you, "Oh, they're all just foxes, they're all the same," trust me, they're not. They can be cheeky, they can be fun, they can be scared of people, they can be quirky, they can be a bit too brave, they can be really silly, just much like all the traits us humans possess and present in our lives. Foxes cover pretty much the broad spectrum of them as well. So my love of foxes has been around for a very long time. As you can see, it says on the screen there, from trying to protect foxes from fox hunters. And it's something that I did for a very long time, is being a hunt saboteur. And I was very, very proud of that fact. I was taking direct and non-violent action in the countryside in Scotland, where sadly, you may not think it still happens, but the foxes are hunted in our countryside still by fox hunts, and it's something that still needs to change, maybe one day. And, you know, also go out there and solve conflicts when they arise with foxes for people all over the UK, mainly London, funny enough, and Glasgow, the two big hotspots I cover. But this can be helping people just overcome simple things. A lot of the time it's just simple misunderstanding of foxes. And once I can help people overcome them, then they realise the fox isn't a problem. So we'll go on to the next slide. Pests, I say pests to some. Foxes, you know, there's always going to be people who don't like foxes. And the first thing they'll say is they're pests or they're vermin. They're not classified as either. They're not really a pest. If anything, foxes are a fantastic creature to have in our urban areas. And the reason this is because, you know, talk about pests, foxes are the best form of urban pest control. If you don't like having rats or mice or pigeons in your garden, then having a fox, they'll sort that problem out better than any human can. Doing it nature's way, I guess. Sadly, there's a lot of people that still hate foxes, and you'll get those who simply just don't understand what's going on with the fox. And then you'll get those, sadly, who hate foxes and like to kill them for fun. I won't go into that too much because I could do a whole new presentation on that. They are legally snared, trapped and shot in the UK still, and it is absolutely ridiculous. And I do believe OneKind's been doing some amazing work around trying to change or stop the snaring, because, you know, these creatures they get caught in these snares in the countryside, and they can be there for hours, if not days, you know, suffering. And it's not on. We shouldn't be doing this to our wildlife. Our wildlife at the moment is under great pressure. Every part of our ecosystem is being manipulated or put under pressure by us humans, and we need to do more to help them, not continue our ways of how we treat wildlife, and especially foxes in the UK. And the bit I mentioned before, you know, they're still hunted by organised fox hunters and footpacks across the UK, and especially here in Scotland. You know, a lot of people think that the hunting ban came in and that was the end of it, but first-hand experience, I know it's still going on, and I do follow the amazing hunt sabs and all the work they do out in the field, and you know, you do see it's still happening around us right now. If you live in Edinburgh, there's fox hunts to the north and south of you. You know, half-hour's drive and you can come across a fox hunt. If you're in Glasgow, if you head west, you're going to come across a fox hunt, and it's, you know, they shouldn't be there anymore. There's no reason for them to be still killing our Scottish foxes in our countryside. It's not theirs, it's ours. It's everyone's to enjoy. So why do people see them as pests? And say, you know, don't worry, I don't hate them, I love them, and I don't see them as pests. And every time I say pests, I'm saying that in inverted commas because I don't mean it. It's just terminology I'm using here. To some, foxes shouldn't be in our urban areas as they create noise, you know, damage gardens and get into rubbish. But these are things, you know, humans create more noise than any other animal in our towns and cities. Well, pre-COVID, on a Saturday night, towns would be noisy and messy. There'll be damage to gardens. damage to our towns, and it won't be the foxes doing it, it's us humans. But you know, when foxes create noise at night, we'll address this one firstly. So the time you're going to really hear foxes is in the breeding season. So actually, in the next couple of weeks, for the next couple of months, you may hear foxes at night, and it's because we're coming into the breeding season. So foxes are pairing up and are getting ready to, you know, pair up and have their cubs for next year. Now, I used to work at a wildlife rescue centre in Essex as a teenager, and 11 o'clock one evening, waiting for my train to go home, I heard what I thought was a woman screaming up the road for me. And I ran up the road to go and see what was going on, to see if someone needed help. And it turned out it was a fox. So you can sometimes hear the screaming of foxes, and especially in urban areas, it can be quite a scary noise when you're a young teenager at night time to hear. But, you know, they're not going to be doing it all night long. They're not going to be screaming all night long. So, you know, in these cases, you know, you can just tolerate it in that sense. And damage to gardens, you know, they don't do a great deal of damage to gardens. On a rare occasion, they will do. But that's when people need to come to organisations like Humane Wildlife Solutions and Foxagon, because we can help people find solutions to these. But sadly, even in our towns and cities now, people are still having foxes shot for no other reason than a fox marking its territory or simply passing through its garden. And it's done because of fears and misunderstanding of what danger the fox is going to possess to people. And one of the things I find, and I truly believe, is people love to try and control every aspect of their life. And as soon as a wild animal comes into their sphere of influence, let's say their garden, they want to control that too. But people need to understand that, you know, yes, we have our houses and gardens and our parks and our towns and our urban areas, but foxes share these spaces with us. It's as much their home as it is ours. And we need to learn, I think, to share these spaces better with these amazing creatures. And as for foxes getting to rubbish, that's really just humans being lazy. We can store our rubbish better. I think most of us now have wheelie bins, so we don't usually get that problem anymore with foxes getting into our rubbish. And if anything, us humans causing more rubbish by, you know, anyone knows going to an urban area and you'll see human litter everywhere. We have street cleaners in all our towns and cities trying to keep it tidy, and it's not because of foxes are causing a mess and spreading rubbish, it's because us humans are. So how will people overcome any conflicts, and how do we show that foxes are one of UK's most amazing mammals? That's not my personal opinion. I generally think they are one of the most amazing mammals we have in the UK. If anyone who's watching has ever had the chance to really get to know the local fox and, you know, form a friendship with them, and you can. These are sentient creatures who will learn to trust people. And when you build that up, you understand just how incredible they are. So misunderstood foxes. They are probably one of the UK's most misunderstood mammals, and it's this misunderstanding that ends up being killed in many ways. And sadly, every year in Scotland, if not hundreds and thousands, are killed needlessly by shooting, hunting and snaring. And so what are some of these issues? So in urban areas, I get a lot of phone calls all year round now, funny enough, about foxes making their homes in our urban areas. And it's usually under someone's shed or under their decking. Now, the scary thing is people will contact the conventional pest controller, and I know reports of these conventional pest controllers, some of them, not all of them, I'm not saying they're all doing this, but some of them will shoot them, someone will live catch them and dump them in the countryside, which they shouldn't be doing. Technically, it's illegal, because once you take a wild animal in your control, and then if you go and dump it in the countryside, that fox isn't going to survive. So you can't really relocate foxes in urban areas. And the reason they don't survive is because if you take a fox out of its territory and dump it somewhere new in the countryside, and it's not where they belong. You know, they do belong in our urban areas now. That fox who's now been dumped, he doesn't know where to find safety. So he has no shelter. He doesn't know where their food source is. He doesn't know where water is. and the resident foxes are going to chase that fox and harry that fox until that fox is either hit by a car or attacked and killed by other foxes, or simply just for the stress of it won't survive. So if you do have a problem with foxes, relocation's not a solution. Again, contact Fox or Garden or myself, and we'll find you a solution of how to help with these issues. So what do you do if a fox is underneath your shed or your decking, or dug an earth in your garden? Well, tackle the shed and the decking firstly. So they go to these spaces, not because they live there all year round, and they go to these spaces because these are places where they will raise their cubs. Now, if you have foxes in the garden, you got a nice big bit of decking or a nice big shed or workshop at the end of your garden, you know, there's a good chance if the fox doesn't get under there, they will use that as a denning site. And they'll have usually, you know, 2 to 3 different sites in their territory in case they need to move their young around. Now, if they are under there, you know, we can exclude these foxes so we can get them out from underneath, and then we can prove it so they can't get back under again. And some people have questioned whether this is cruel or not. And it's not in any sense, I don't believe. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, because the fox is allowed to leave on its own accord. It's still within its territory, so it knows where the safe places are to go, even if, you know, we have excluded one of those places. But not just that, you know, because that fox is still in his territory, he's got other places where he knows he can go, other earth or den sites, and he'll simply go to those sites. So by doing actions like this exclusion work, it's stopping the need or the desire for people to have our urban foxes killed. Because in urban areas, if someone doesn't come to a non-lethal organisation, then the only option they're going to trap it or they're going to shoot it, and all what's going to happen is another fox is going to fill that vacant territory, and they'll still have the problems. So the way we do things, we give them a solution. We don't just treat the symptoms. Now, earths dug in gardens are tough work to get through. And I will just say that, you know, the work we do, we wouldn't do this work if there's really young cubs there, unless the cubs are in immediate danger, i.e. someone's going to have the cubs killed. We'd always encourage the people to allow the foxes to grow up a little bit more, so it's easier for the parents to remove them, take them to a different den site. But somebody else, I remember I did one in Stenhouse Muir, and the fox earth was 16 foot long. It took me all day to follow the tunnels, and I have to, when I'm doing this, have to follow to every end of every single tunnel, every chamber, to make sure there's no fox in there before I dismantle the fox earth. And that was a tough one. That was a real tough one. I had a nice one up in Norfolk, Glasgow and Bearsden just this summer, removing a magnificent and a really old fox earth in someone's garden. The people didn't want them hurt, but they also wanted the foxes no longer be in their garden. So they sought our help and advice to move them on. And it was, you know, it's good fun doing these jobs, but also it's quite sad because, you know, this fox has made this amazing home over such a long period of time, and I have to sadly, you know, take those homes apart. But it is for the benefit of the fox, because he's then not going to be harmed in any way. Right, there are loads of solutions, you know, for fox as well. Other problems that people will often say is foxes which are digging up their lawns or they're fouling in their garden. Now, this is a very common problem, but it's also very easy to solve. So if you have a fox in your garden and you're not particularly keen on them being there, and they're fouling or digging in your lawn, I'll give you the advice, as simple tips. So what you do is you pick up the droppings. So use gloves and a doggy bag, just remove that out of the way. And then you want to use hot soapy water and you pour it on the area. Now the reason to do this is the hot soapy water helps break down any scent that's left there, or any oils that will be acting as a marker to other foxes as a territory marker. And then you would use like scoop fox repellent, which on top of that helps neutralize it and helps keep the fox away. And it, you know, it's so simple, but it works. And it just, you know, I hope this shows you, you don't need to have foxes killed to solve these problems, because it's so easy to stop this from escalating to a point where someone wants the foxes killed. Now, think of the benefits foxes do in our garden. You know, if you don't like rats and mice and birds in your garden, they're great at keeping them away. And you know, the majority of their diet, even for this book, in case you've not seen the book, Urban Foxes, I definitely recommend reading it, by Professor Stephen Harris. Urban foxes eat as many earthworms as they do as wild birds, mammals, and other insects. In fact, scavenging off human waste only represents just over like 20, I think it's about 20% of their food source. So, you know, they're not coming in there and just going full of rubbish all the time. In fact, these days with wheelie bins, they've got less chance to get in our bins. So they do go for their natural food sources. I think a lot of people find it odd that foxes eat worms and insects, but it's a real big staple part of their diet. You know, foxes also, other people will say, you know, that they can take chickens and pet rabbits. But again, you know, foxes will do this. If you're living in an urban area, especially in places like Edinburgh or Glasgow, in further afield in London or Bristol or some of the other real fox hotspots in the UK, and you've got rabbits or chickens that are outside and you know there's foxes around or likely to be around, you need to take every action you can to protect your companion animals, because you don't want to see them being taken by a fox. And you know, it's sad if a fox does take a chicken or rabbit, but it's just being natural. Don't hate on the fox for trying to survive in these situations. And again, get in touch if you have that kind of situation going on, because I can find you a solution to make sure it doesn't happen. And you'll also hear the many scare stories about foxes attacking babies. I've looked into numerous ones of these, quite a few of us have in the past, and I've never ever actually found any solid evidence that that was the actual case that foxes attack babies. I went as far as being in I think it was on maybe the front page of the Daily Record a few years back about a fox attack on a baby. And one of the things that stood out to me straight away was that the bite marks on the baby didn't represent that of what you'd expect a fox to be. And I made a claim that I believed it was a pet dog. The people denied having a pet dog, but a little bit of investigating on just using social media found out the family did have a pet dog. And I think the doctor at the hospital also claimed he believed it was a dog rather than a fox that had bitten the child. And you'll see these scare stories about foxes, and this really does irk me because they always come usually at the end of summer, usually around September time. And it's funny because it always coincides with the start of the fox hunting season. It's like the media try to vilify foxes, and then you have a justification to go and kill the foxes because they're going to be attacking our babies. Simply not true. Like I say, I've worked with many foxes in many really tight situations, and I've never had a fox cause me any harm. One of the scenarios that I was again in Glasgow. You'll hear me talk about Glasgow a lot with foxes because it is a fox hotspot, where I had to go underneath in the middle of the city centre under a terraced, massive long terrace of flats. The fox has got through the event and was living underneath. Now, I opened up the hatch and I jumped down into the crawl space and I virtually landed on a cub, which was terrified, bless it, as I was kind of squatting above it with this little cub looking up at me, with his mum in the corner, now cornered. So this fox is cornered and she can't escape. And she too was terrified. And I felt really bad. I didn't want to scare these foxes. I needed to scare them out. But if there was ever a situation where these foxes were going to cause any harm or even look like they're going to be aggressive, it will be when I'm almost standing over a cub and the mum's cornered next to me. And what do? They both just froze. That's what foxes do if they're really, really terrified. They will freeze. So I simply just crawled back up the crawl space, and the vixen ran out and the cub followed her. And then it was a simple job of just closing up that air vent to stop them getting in again. And it was simple as that. Solving these problems really can be as simple as just common sense. So the story of foxes. So foxes have been in our urban areas for decades. Some studies show that it was after the Second World War when we built big gardens, bigger houses, And these are perfect for foxes, great territories for them to find other animals to eat or insects, or right back then they were going through our food waste, and it was, foxes are a very successful mammal, rival probably only by rats, mice and raccoons in the world of large mammals which have gone into our urban areas and got a good foothold in there. They are a common sight in a town city. If anyone knows Glasgow or even London, you will most likely see a fox. Foxes mate around the end of the year. So like I said, this time of year now, they're getting ready to pair up. They'll have their cubs between March and April, and have anything between 3 to 5 cubs, sometimes more. They can live in small family groups. So sometimes you will find the last year's cubs, especially the young vixens, will stay in a family group and help raise the cubs. Now, when you've got cubs in your garden, it is just the most amazing thing. They're just crazy little hyper things. I love bouncing around gardens. And I remember a real funny case. I can't remember where this one was actually. It was in the central belt of Scotland somewhere, probably Glasgow, who knows. The client had lost a lot of their shoes. I think it was probably like 12 pairs of shoes had all vanished, and he believed it was the fox which was living under his shed. So when I looked underneath the shed, right enough, there was all the shoes and the cubs. For some reason, cubs absolutely love shoes. So if you have foxes in your garden who are raising families and you like your shoes, I wouldn't leave them outside at night, because the cubs will take them and they will play with them. If you just imagine a puppy playing with toys and chewing on your shoes, cubs will do the same thing, and they're just fantastic fun to watch. One of the other things about foxes too is you'll see, if you have them in your garden, you'll get to see these foxes grow up together. You get to see them play and interact, and you'll see the bonds, you'll see the love they have for one another, and that's a really special thing. And I understand if you're seeing foxes in your garden, just how special that can be. So up close cameras, not many people will have the chance to have an up close personal experience with a fox, but if you do have them in your garden and you want them to stay there, you can feed the foxes. But however, I will give some words of warning first of all. I'm all for feeding foxes, but you have to do it responsibly. And I'll explain the reasons why just in a moment. So if you want to feed foxes in your garden, you need to make sure you do it responsibly. And by that, I mean, you don't feed them near your back door. You don't feed them at your window. You don't feed them out of your hand. You have the food in the center of your garden, at the back of the garden, and then you go and stay inside your house and watch them from there and enjoy them just being natural and sharing your garden, your space, and enjoying the food you put out for them. Because the problems what happen with foxes, and another reason why some foxes are killed, is because someone will make this special connection with foxes and they'll feed them in their garden. And it gets to the point where the foxes become so tame and they associate a back door or a window or a person with food sources. So when that fox leaves that safety of that garden where there's a lovely family feeding them, who gets a real special connection. And yes, I encourage everyone to make friends with your local foxes, but just do it responsibly, because if you don't do it responsibly, what will happen is if that fox goes next door or the next door down, foxes can cover, 20, 40, 60 gardens, depending on how many foxes are in that area. And if they go to the wrong house and they go and try and enter someone's door because they're used to going to the door of someone who would feed them, and goes in there and terrifies them. And now if that family doesn't call either Fox Has Gone or myself or the Fox Project, what will happen is they'll call the pest control and will have that fox killed. So you need to be really careful, because if you want to feed foxes, feed them responsibly. Don't put them at risk, because if you tame your foxes, you do risk your foxes going to the wrong garden, the wrong house, and be treated the wrong way. Foxes don't pose any risk to humans by disease or by biting. And as long as you respect them, and as long as you're not going around playing with their droppings, they don't really pose any risk. No more risk than a cat or a dog would do. If a cat's passing through your garden, there's just as much chance of catching something from a cat than there is a fox. fox. And if you've got a garden, you've not been ill from it, then it's pretty much a chance you're not going to catch anything from them at all. And so if you're lucky to have foxes in your garden, do enjoy them. And, you know, one of the things I do as a business, you know, I'm meant to try and make money as a business, but that's not my motivating factor here. What I want to do, I want to help people understand all the animals that I work with and all the animals that people come into conflict with. And one of the best ways I think is to do this is, so example, you know, people contact me and say they've got foxes in the garden, they've got young children, and they're terrified that the fox is going to attack their children, or they're going to spread disease to their cat or to their dog. And by the time I've finished educating them, you know, I've had families who invited, and this is again pre-COVID times, who invited their neighbours over, their grandchildren or other family members to come in the evening to watch and enjoy the foxes. And it's simply about education. And, you know, people say I do myself out of money and jobs, and you know, that's going against what a business is meant to do. But my first priority is making sure that fox is safe. And if that's by educating people and helping people learn to love their foxes, then it's job done. That's the best result. If I can go away from a call with someone who started terrified of foxes in their garden, and then to spin it around to the point that they're getting their children to come, or they're getting their neighbours to come, or their grandchildren to come and enjoy these creatures, that means then people are learning to love and respect and share our spaces with these amazing mammals. So my encounters with foxes, I've had quite a few over the years. This is a bit of artwork I had Kate Louise Powell, a very good friend of mine. She's also an amazing hunt saboteur and animal activist. I got her to design this to me because it's something that's very, very meaningful to me. So when I first started being a hunt sab, I sadly witnessed 2 cubs running out from a hunt, followed by the vixen, and the vixen stopped, sat down, and she sacrificed herself to save her cubs. And it traumatized me for many, many years. I don't know if you can see the tattoo on my arm here, just there. That's the picture there. But I got that tattoo to remember that fox, because it was awful having to witness that, seeing that going on. And that was probably my real first encounter with foxes. And it was lovely seeing the cubs, but not seeing them in that situation. But yeah, it's always tough to talk about. But there was many encounters. You know, I've already discussed about the fox and the cub under the Glasgow house. But another one was I got called to go out to the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, to the athletes' village, where they had foxes living under the actual dining hall for the athletes. Now, this was a problem because they didn't want the foxes there, but the people who were building the athletes' village were feeding the foxes. So this fox family moved in, and they had all their cubs about, and these cubs were going up to people happily trying to see if they could get some food off them. And luckily I was there to say, you know, looking into the dining hall, saying, you know, you do realise that big gap right in the middle of the dining hall, which leads down to the ground, is where the foxes are. So if you don't want foxes popping up in the middle of an awards ceremony or in a meal for all the athletes from all over the world, and then just waltzing around taking off people's plates, which these foxes are really tame, and they probably would have done, they might want to close the hole up. And simply by following my advice on that day, you know, we saved these foxes. They weren't harmed. They followed the advice, excluded the foxes from the site. And, you know, well done to the Commonwealth Games Committee for actually thinking outside the box, and Glasgow City Council for seeking a non-lethal alternative. And you know, it really showed it can be achieved and it can be done. And, you know, we need to change the narrative with our urban wildlife, not just foxes, but all of them. And we need to start to educate ourselves and understand about them. So I will go on to Curiosity of the Cubs. This is one of the cubs at the Commonwealth Games Committee. And this is him actually under the dining hall. I sat down on the step and he decided he was going to come and join me. So I'll let you watch this just briefly. As you can see, those ears are just gorgeous, aren't they? I mean, come on, who doesn't like that? And so he was tamed by people feeding him, and he was expectant of food here. And it was a really magical experience, you know. He was coming up sniffing my phone, and yeah, it was a really magical experience. But it's this kind of behaviour which sadly gets foxes into trouble. And it's these kind of behaviours that I think we need to really try to be more responsible with as people. And I'm all for people feeding foxes, but please do it responsibly, because if you ever tame a fox, you're putting that fox at more risk than you would hope. So once again, I always do this. A big shout out to OneKind. They're an amazing organisation. I've worked with them quite a lot this year, funny enough. The whole team there are incredible what they do for Scottish wildlife. And, you know, please support their campaigns, even just by liking a post, sharing something, or if you can, you know, donate. If you want to go better, start a fundraiser, because the work they do really, really does help our Scottish wildlife.